The stars had never looked so cold to Admiral Lee Hyun-woo as they did today. He stood on the bridge of the Taeguk's Fury, watching the massive alien fleet approach through the view screen. 12 different ship designs moved together in perfect formation, each one representing a different species from the Galactic Dominion. Their ships were beautiful in a way that human vessels could never be. Smooth curves, glowing energy fields, and technology that seemed to bend light itself. But beauty meant nothing when those ships carried a death sentence for humanity. "Admiral, we're receiving their transmission," said Communications Officer Park Ji-soo. Her voice was steady, but Hyun-woo could see the tension in her shoulders. Everyone on the bridge knew what this meeting would bring. "Put it through," Hyun-woo replied. The view screen flickered, and suddenly, he was looking at something that still made his skin crawl after 50 years of contact with aliens. The creature had 6 arms arranged around a central body, with a head that seemed to shift and change shape as it spoke. This was Overlord Kethmore of the Vextar, one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. "Human Admiral," the alien's voice came through the translation system as a cold, mechanical tone. "I bring you the final decision of the Council of Hierarchs. Your species has 7 standard days to evacuate all colonies and return to your home system. Any humans found outside Earth's solar system after this time will be eliminated." Hyun-woo had expected this, but hearing it still felt like a punch to the stomach. "And if we refuse?" The alien's form seemed to ripple with what might have been amusement. "Then we will demonstrate why the Dominion has ruled this galaxy for 3,000 years, and why primitive species like yours should have stayed on their birth worlds." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Hyun-woo looked around at his crew. They were good people, all of them. Park Ji-soo had a daughter back on New Seoul Colony. Engineer Seo Min-woo had just gotten married last month. Weapons Officer Kim Tae-jin collected old Earth music and played guitar in his spare time. They were ordinary humans living ordinary lives, and now they were being told to give up everything they had built or die. "Sir," Park Ji-soo said quietly, "President Kim Jin-ho is requesting immediate quantum communication." "Put him through to my ready room," Hyun-woo said. "The rest of you, maintain position but stay alert. And someone get Dr. Park Nari up here. We need our best xenobiologist for what comes next." In his private quarters, Hyun-woo activated the quantum communicator. The image of President Kim Jin-ho appeared, looking older than his 60 years. The president's office on Earth seemed impossibly far away right now. "Hyun-woo," the president said without preamble, "tell me everything." "It's as bad as we thought, sir. Complete evacuation in 7 days, or they start killing civilians." Kethmore delivered it personally, which means the entire council agreed on this. President Kim was quiet for a long moment. "How many people would we have to evacuate?" 42 million across 30 colonies, sir. We don't have enough ships, and we don't have enough time." "I know." The president's voice was heavy. "Dr. Park Nari is on her way to you. She's going to make one final attempt at negotiation. If that fails..." He paused. "If that fails, we implement Protocol Wildfire." Hyun-woo felt his blood turn cold. Protocol Wildfire was humanity's most classified military doctrine, known only to a handful of people in the government and military. It was the plan they had hoped they would never need. "Sir, are you certain? Once we cross that line..." "Admiral, 50 years ago, when we first left Earth, we made a promise to ourselves. We would never again allow another species to dictate. Whether humans lived or died, the Dominion has made their choice. Now we make ours." 3 hours later, Dr. Park Nari arrived on the Teguk's Fury. She was a small woman in her 40s, with graying hair and the kind of calm confidence that came from years of studying alien psychology. She had been humanity's primary contact with the Dominion since first contact, and she knew their species better than any other human alive. "This is a mistake," she told Hyunwoo as they prepared for the diplomatic meeting. "The Vextar respect strength, but they define strength differently than we do. To them, strength is stability, order, control. They see our expansion as chaos." "Can you change their minds?" Hyunwoo asked. Dr. Park was quiet for a moment. "No. I've studied their psychology for decades. Once the council makes a decision like this, they view any change as weakness. They would rather destroy us than admit they were wrong." The meeting took place aboard the Dominion flagship, a massive vessel that dwarfed even humanity's largest ships. Dr. Park was escorted through corridors that seemed designed to make visitors feel small and insignificant. The architecture was all flowing curves and impossible angles, lit by soft bioluminescent panels that hurt human eyes to look at directly. The council chamber was a vast spherical room with the 12 hierarchs positioned around the walls. Each one represented their species in the Dominion government. Dr. Park had met most of them before, but seeing them all together was overwhelming. The Zefkari with their crystalline bodies that rang like bells when they moved. The Morthans who existed as energy patterns within mechanical shells. The Quilax whose thoughts moved so slowly that a single sentence might take an hour to complete. And at the center of it all, Overlord Kethmore of the Vextar, human representative. Kethmore's translated voice filled the chamber. "You come to waste our time with more of your species' pointless bargaining." Dr. Park stepped forward, her hands clasped behind her back in a gesture of respect that most of the hierarchs recognized. "Honored hierarchs, I come to offer you a gift." That got their attention. Several of the aliens made sounds that the translator interpreted as curiosity. "Humanity offers our complete technological databases, our scientific research, our cultural archives, everything we have learned in 50 years of space travel, freely given to the Dominion in exchange for allowing us to remain in our current colonies." Kethmore's form shifted, and the translator labeled his response as contemptuous laughter. "Your technology? Human. Your ships barely achieve light speed. Your weapons are chemical explosives and metal projectiles. Your computers are electronic circuits when ours are quantum consciousness matrices. What could you possibly offer us?" "Perspective," Dr. Park said simply. "We see problems differently than you do. We find solutions you wouldn't consider. We adapt faster than any species you've encountered." "You spread like a disease," interrupted Hierarch Veltun of the Christine Collective. "You consume resources, multiply without control, and bring violence wherever you go. Your own history is nothing but warfare." "Yes," Dr. Park said, and her calm agreement seemed to surprise them. "We are a violent species. We fight constantly, even among ourselves, but that violence taught us something important." She paused, looking around the chamber at all 12 hierarchs. "It taught us that survival is more important than civilization. It taught us that when someone threatens your family, your children, your future, you don't negotiate. You don't compromise. You fight until either you win or you die trying." The chamber fell silent. Dr. Park could feel the weight of 12 alien gazes upon her. "Are you threatening us, human?" Kethmore asked, his voice carrying a new edge. "No," Honored Hierarch, I'm warning you. What happened next would be debated by historians for generations. Dr. Park activated a small device she had carried into the chamber, a quantum transmitter that sent a single signal back to Earth. Within seconds, that signal was relayed to every human colony, every human ship, every human settlement in the galaxy. The message was simple. Wildfire Protocol is authorized. Begin implementation immediately. But the hierarchs didn't know that yet. They were still focused on the small human woman standing in the center of their great chamber. You have made your decision, Dr. Park said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. You want us gone from your galaxy. You've given us 7 days to abandon everything we've built, everyone we've become. She looked directly at Kethmore. I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that we tried to be reasonable. We offered you our knowledge, our cooperation, our friendship. You rejected all of it. Your point, human? Kethmore demanded. Dr. Park smiled, and there was something in that smile that made several of the hierarchs shift uncomfortably in their positions. My point is that you've just made the biggest mistake in the history of your civilization. You've given humanity an ultimatum. And there's something you need to understand about my species. She paused, letting the silence stretch. We don't respond well to ultimatums. The transmission from Earth came 12 hours later, broadcast simultaneously to every world in Dominion space. President Kim Jin-ho appeared on every screen, every communication device, every public display in the galaxy. His words were simple and clear. People of the Galactic Dominion, your leaders have demanded that humanity abandon our homes and return to Earth. They have threatened to kill our families if we refuse. This is our response. The president's face was calm, but his eyes held a hardness that made veteran Dominion military officers uncomfortable. We reject your ultimatum. Humanity will not be moved. We will not abandon our children's futures because you find our existence inconvenient. He leaned forward slightly. This is your final warning. Withdraw your fleets. Cancel your ultimatum. Allow us to live in peace, because if you don't, we will show you what 40,000 years of warfare has taught our species. The transmission ended with a single sentence that would echo through galactic history. We don't stop until it's Ash. General Choi Min-ho stood in the underground command center on Earth, watching as screens around him lit up with confirmation signals from across human space. Protocol Wildfire was active, and there was no going back now. The facility was buried, 3 kilometers beneath the Korean mountains, hidden from orbital scans and protected by enough armor to survive a direct nuclear strike. It had been built in secret over 30 years, using mining operations as cover. All stations report ready, sir, said Colonel Park Suna, his operations officer. Sleeper assets are in position. Strike teams have reached their targets. Phase 1 can begin on your command. Min-ho nodded slowly. He was a thin man in his 50s, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much war. Before joining the Space Force, he had been a historian specializing in human conflict. That background had made him the perfect person to design humanities. True military doctrine. Begin Phase 1, he said quietly. The first target was a Dominion supply depot in the Kepler 442 system, far from any major population centers. It was defended by a small garrison and considered completely safe by Dominion standards. The aliens had no reason to expect an attack there. Commander Yoon Tae-hyung led the assault from his ship, the Soul's Revenge. His crew was small, only 12 people. But they had been training for this mission for 5 years. As they approached the depot, The Dominion sensors detected them easily. "Unknown human vessel, you are in restricted space," came the communication from the depot. "Identify yourself and state your business." Taehyung smiled grimly. "This is Commander Yoon Taehyung of the Earth Defense Force. I'm here to deliver a message." What happened next shocked the galaxy. Instead of demanding surrender or attempting to disable the facility, Taehyung's ship opened fire with every weapon it had. But these weren't the primitive projectile weapons the Dominion expected from humans. These were something new. The first salvo was kinetic penetrators moving at 90% of light speed. They punched through the depot's shields like they weren't there, turning the station's superstructure into expanding clouds of plasma. The second salvo was nuclear warheads, each one designed to maximize radiation output rather than explosive force. Within minutes, the depot was gone. Not damaged, not disabled. Gone. And more importantly, everything living within 50,000 kilometers was dead from radiation poisoning. The Dominion fleet that arrived 6 hours later found no survivors, no wreckage worth salvaging, and radiation, levels that would make the area uninhabitable for centuries. They also found a single message beacon broadcasting on all frequencies. This is what happens when you threaten human children. Next time, we won't start with an empty depot. News of the attack spread through Dominion space like wildfire. Military commanders, who had been preparing for a simple police action against primitive humans, suddenly found themselves trying to understand what they were really facing. Back on Earth, General Minho was explaining the situation to President Kim Jin-ho and the cabinet. "The Dominion fights wars the way most civilized species do," Minho said, standing before a holographic display showing Dominion military doctrine. "They target military installations. They attempt to minimize civilian casualties. They follow rules of engagement that limit collateral damage. They fight to achieve political objectives." He pressed a control and the display changed to show human military history. "We don't fight that way. We never have. When humans fight, we fight to win completely. We target whatever gives us the best chance of victory, regardless of whether it's military or civilian. We use whatever weapons are most effective, regardless of whether they're considered civilized. We continue fighting until our enemy surrenders unconditionally or ceases to exist." Defense Minister Lee Soo-jin raised her hand. "General, what you're describing sounds like genocide." "Yes, ma'am, it does," Minho replied without hesitation. "Because that's exactly what the Dominion is threatening us with. They want to remove humanity from the galaxy entirely. So we're going to show them what total war actually looks like." The second phase began 3 days later. Engineer Seo Ji-won had spent 15 years working on what she called the Revelation Project. While the Dominion focused on energy weapons and shield technology, she had been developing something completely different. The target was a Dominion patrol squadron in the Vega system. 12 ships, state-of-the-art technology, crews that had never lost a battle in their careers. They detected the approaching human ships easily and moved to intercept them. "Human vessels, you are ordered to surrender immediately," transmitted Squadron Leader Vex Cole. "Your ships are outnumbered and outgunned. Submit to boarding and you will be treated according to galactic law." Captain Oh Do-yun, commanding the 8th Human Squadron, responded with a simple message: "No." What followed was unlike any space battle in galactic history. The human ships didn't try to match the Dominion vessel's firepower or maneuverability. Instead, they accelerated directly toward the enemy fleet at maximum speed. The Dominion crews were confused. This looked like a suicide attack, but that made no tactical sense. Even primitive species understood that ramming attacks were wasteful and ineffective against modern shields. They were still confused when Captain Oh Do-yun's ship, traveling at 60% of light speed, impacted the Dominion flagship. The kinetic energy released was equivalent to a small star going supernova. The flagship didn't just explode, it ceased to exist on a molecular level. The shock wave destroyed 3 nearby ships instantly and crippled the rest of the squadron, but that wasn't the end of it. As the surviving Dominion ships tried to retreat, they discovered that the other human vessels had released clouds of microscopic probes throughout the battle area. These probes attached themselves to the fleeing ships and began broadcasting detailed information about Dominion technology, crew locations, and tactical capabilities back to Earth. More importantly, some of the probes carried a special gift from Engineer COG-1. They were programmed to infiltrate Dominion computer systems and plant a simple virus. Nothing immediately destructive, just a small program that would activate later and cause random system failures at the worst possible moments. The survivors limped back to Dominion space, carrying stories that no one wanted to believe. Humans had sacrificed an entire squadron just to destroy one enemy ship. They had used their own people as weapons, and somehow they had made it look like a victory. Dr. Lim So-hee was monitoring the galaxy's reaction from her laboratory on Luna. She was a small woman with bright eyes and a mind that could solve problems no one else even understood. For 20 years, she had been working on humanity's greatest secret, a network of hidden installations spread throughout Dominion space. "The relay stations are responding perfectly," she told General Minho during their daily briefing. "The Dominion still thinks they're just mining operations and research outposts. They have no idea that each one is actually a military base with enough firepower to sterilize a planet." The relay stations had been humanity's greatest gamble. Disguised as civilian operations, staffed by people who genuinely believed they were miners and researchers, the stations had been built over decades of careful planning. Each one was small enough to avoid suspicion, but contained enough weapons and supplies to support extended military operations. More importantly, they were connected by a quantum communication network that allowed them to coordinate instantly across thousands of light years. While the Dominion relied on ships to carry messages between star systems, humans could now communicate in real time throughout the galaxy. "How many stations are active?" Minho asked. 2,437, So-hee replied. "We have coverage of every major Dominion system and most of the minor ones. When you're ready for Phase 3, we can hit them simultaneously across their entire territory. But Phase 3 would have to wait." The Dominion was finally beginning to understand what they were facing, and their response was swift and brutal. Fleet Admiral Kothmar of the Dominion Third Fleet had been given simple orders. Find the human, homeworld, and make an example of it. His force consisted of 300 ships, enough firepower to crack a planet's crust and boil its oceans. As his fleet approached the Sol system, they expected to find a primitive civilization cowering behind, whatever defenses they could manage. Instead, they found something that made no sense. Earth's orbital space was filled with structures that looked like industrial platforms, massive mining operations, construction facilities, and what appeared to be civilian habitats. There were thousands of them, enough to house millions of people. "Admiral," reported his sensor officer, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures from those platforms. They're not civilian installations." Kothmar realized the truth just as the platforms began moving. They weren't mining equipment or habitats. They were weapons platforms, each one the size of a small moon and armed with weapons that made Dominion dreadnoughts look like toys. The platforms didn't fire immediately. Instead, they transmitted a message that was broadcast to the entire galaxy. This is Admiral Lee Hyun-woo of Earth Defense Command. You came here to destroy our homeworld and kill our families. You're welcome to try. The battle for Earth lasted 18 hours and became known as the most one-sided military defeat in galactic history. The Dominion fleet never got within weapons range of the planet. The orbital platforms, revealed to be mobile battle stations that had been disguised for decades, destroyed the entire Dominion force without taking significant damage. But more importantly, the battle was broadcast live to every world in the galaxy. Billions of people watched as humanity demonstrated that their threats weren't empty boasts. They had been preparing for this war for 50 years, and they were ready for anything the Dominion could throw at them. The message was clear. Humanity didn't fight like other species. They didn't follow galactic conventions about warfare. They had turned their entire civilization into a weapon, and they were willing to use it. As the wreckage of the Dominion fleet drifted through Earth's solar system, General Minho sent a simple message to every Dominion world. This was your warning. Shot. Next time, we come to you. Fleet Commander Velthak of the Dominion's Second Armada stared at the tactical display with growing horror. The reports coming in from across Dominion space all told the same impossible story. Human ships were appearing everywhere at once, striking targets that should have been impossible to reach, using weapons and tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare. Sir, his intelligence officer reported, we've confirmed attacks on 17 different systems in the past 6 hours, all simultaneous, all successful. Velthak was a Morthan, his consciousness existing as patterns of energy within a crystalline shell. His species had fought wars for 3,000 years, always following the established protocols. You attacked military targets. You gave enemies a chance to surrender. You treated prisoners with dignity. These humans seem to understand none of these basic concepts. What are they targeting? He asked. Everything, sir. Military bases, supply depots, communication centers, civilian infrastructure. They don't seem to be following any strategic pattern we can understand. But there was a pattern. General Choi Minho had designed it carefully, based on 50 years of studying every Dominion military action on record. While the aliens focused on obvious strategic targets, humans were attacking the nervous system of Dominion civilization itself. Communication relays went dark. Supply chains broke down. Administrative centers disappeared in nuclear fire. Within days, the Dominion's carefully organized military machine began grinding to a halt as local commanders lost contact with higher authority and supply ships failed to arrive on schedule. The Dominion's response was swift and predictable. If humans wanted to ignore the rules of war, they would be taught why those rules existed. Overlord Kethmore himself led the expedition to New Busan Colony. It was one of humanity's newest settlements, home to 12 million people who had moved there to build better lives for their families. The colony had no military installations, no strategic value. It existed purely as a civilian population center, perfect for making an example. Citizens of New Busan, Kethmore broadcast to the planet as his fleet took position in orbit. Your species has chosen to wage war against the Galactic Dominion. You will now learn the price of such foolishness. The bombardment began at dawn, local time. Kethmore made sure it was slow and thorough, giving the colonists time to understand what was happening to them. Orbital strikes turned cities into glass craters. Atmospheric processors that had taken decades to build were reduced to scrap metal. Hospitals, schools, homes, everything that made New Busan a place where humans could live and raise families, was systematically destroyed. When it was over, New Busan was a dead world. 12 million people had been reduced to ash and radiation, their only crime being born human. The footage was broadcast across the galaxy as a warning. This is what happened to species that defied the Dominion. This is why the established order existed. This is why primitive races should know their place. The broadcast reached Earth 6 hours later. President Kim Jin-ho watched it in his office, surrounded by his military advisors and cabinet members. On the screen, Kethmore stood among the ruins of what had been New Busan's capital city. Let this be a lesson to all who would challenge Dominion. Authority, the alien said, his translated voice carrying smug satisfaction. Your species brought this destruction upon themselves. Surrender now, and no more of your colonies will share this fate. When the transmission ended, the room was silent. Everyone present knew someone who had lived on New Busan. Family members, friends, colleagues. All gone now. Sir, General Min-ho said quietly, the cabinet is waiting for your orders. President Kim stood up slowly. He was thinking about his own granddaughter, who had been planning to move to New Busan next year to study xenobiology. She would never get that chance now. General, he said, his voice completely calm. Activate Phase 4 of Protocol Wildfire. All restrictions are lifted. Show them what human war really looks like. Admiral John Minji received her orders while her fleet was hiding in the asteroid belt of the Rigel system. She was a career military officer who had spent 20 years studying Dominion culture and psychology. She understood exactly what the destruction of New Busan meant, and she knew exactly how to respond. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced to her crew over the ship's communication system. We have new orders. Operation Broken Chain is now active. We are authorized to use any means necessary to complete our mission objectives. Operation Broken Chain was something that had never been attempted in galactic history. Instead of targeting military installations or strategic resources, it focused on something much more personal, the families of Dominion leadership. Minji's first target was the homeworld of Fleet Commander Velthak. The Morthan kept their young in crystalline nurseries where developing consciousnesses learned to inhabit their mechanical shells. It was their most sacred tradition, protected by layers of defensive systems and cultural taboos. The human attack came without warning. Stealth. Ships that had been hidden in the system's outer debris field suddenly appeared in orbit around the Morthan homeworld. They didn't target military installations or government buildings. They went straight for the nursery complexes. The Morthan defenders were caught completely off guard. Their entire military doctrine was built around protecting strategic assets, not civilian targets. They had never imagined that anyone would attack their children. Within hours, 17 nursery complexes were burning ruins. Thousands of developing Morthan consciousnesses had been destroyed before they could even learn to think. The attack was broadcast live across Dominion space with a simple message from Admiral Minji. You killed our children on New Busan. Now, you know how it feels. But that was just the beginning. Captain Bang Johan led a strike team to the Vex-Tar religious homeworld, where their species' most sacred temple had stood for 3,000 years. The temple contained the collective memories of every Vex-Tar who had ever lived, a cultural treasure that was literally irreplaceable. Johan's team didn't just destroy the temple, they desecrated it first, painting human symbols on its walls. and broadcasting footage of themselves dancing on sacred artifacts. Only then did they set off the nuclear charge that turned the entire complex into a radioactive crater. The message they left behind was simple. Your sacred places mean nothing to us. Surrender, or watch everything you value burn. Across Dominion space, similar attacks were happening simultaneously. The Christine Collective's art galleries, where they stored crystalline sculptures that took centuries to grow. The Kilnari birthing pools, where their young spent their first years of life. The Zenthari memory archives containing the recorded history of their entire civilization, all of it targeted, all of it destroyed, all of it broadcast live with the same message. Human patience had ended. Colonel Han Sunmi was the one who explained humanity's new policy to the galaxy. She was a military psychologist who understood exactly how to break enemy morale. Her broadcast went out on every communication channel in Dominion space. People of the Galactic Dominion, she said, standing in what had been the Vextar's holiest shrine. Your leaders have chosen to target our civilian populations. They destroyed New Busan to teach us a lesson about power. She gestured to the ruins around her. This is our response. We are not bound by your rules of war. We do not recognize your concepts of sacred and profane. We do not care about your cultural treasures or your ancient traditions. You declared total war on humanity when you murdered 12 million innocent people. Now you will learn what total war actually means. The broadcast continued for 10 minutes, with Han Sunmi calmly explaining humanity's new military doctrine. They would target anything that caused psychological damage to their enemies. Families, religious sites, cultural centers, historical landmarks. Nothing was off limits. Nothing was sacred. You wanted to teach us about consequences, she concluded. Lesson learned. Now we're going to teach you. The galaxy recoiled in horror. This wasn't how civilized species fought wars. Even the most aggressive races in Dominion space followed basic rules about protecting non-combatants and respecting cultural sites. These humans seemed to take active pleasure in violating every principle of civilized warfare. But humanity was just getting started. Dr. An Ji-hoon had been working on biological weapons for 30 years, ever since first contact with the Dominion. While other human scientists focused on understanding alien biology for medical purposes, he had been learning how to kill it. His laboratory on Titan was the most secure facility in human space, surrounded by multiple layers of containment systems and staffed by volunteers who knew they would never leave. The work they did there was too dangerous to risk any contamination, reaching civilian populations. The beauty of biological warfare, Dr. An explained to his team as they prepared their latest creation, is that it's personal. Energy weapons kill quickly and cleanly. Nuclear weapons destroy everything equally. But viruses can be artistic. The virus he had designed for the Vextar was a masterpiece of malicious creativity. It attacked their nervous system, slowly, causing hallucinations and paranoia before finally killing them. But the hallucinations weren't random. They were specifically designed to show each victim the destruction of everything they cared about over and over again. More importantly, the virus carried a payload of human propaganda, broadcasting messages directly into the victims' minds as they died. Messages about human determination, human strength, human refusal to be intimidated by alien threats. The first outbreak occurred on 3 Vextar worlds simultaneously. The virus spread quickly through their population centers, causing panic and chaos. Medical facilities were overwhelmed. Quarantine procedures broke down. Within weeks, entire cities were ghost towns filled with the dead and dying. But the virus didn't stop there. It had been designed to mutate rapidly, adapting to new host species as it spread. Soon variants were appearing on other Dominion worlds, each one tailored to the specific biology of its targets. The Morthan variant caused their crystalline shells to crack and shatter, leaving their energy consciousness exposed to painful dissipation. The Christine variant turned their beautiful mineral bodies into toxic waste that poisoned everything around them. Each version was carefully crafted to be not just lethal, but psychologically devastating. Overlord Kethmore watched the reports flood in from across Dominion space. Billions of his people were dying from human-made plagues. Sacred sites were burning. Military commanders were losing contact with their families and going insane with grief and rage. This wasn't war as he understood it. This was something far worse. The humans weren't trying to defeat the Dominion militarily. They were trying to break them completely, to destroy not just their ability to fight, but their will to exist as a civilization. And it was working. "Sir," his aide reported, "we're receiving surrender requests from 47 member worlds. They want to negotiate separate peace treaties with the humans." Kethmore's form rippled with rage. "Inform them that any world that negotiates with the enemy will be considered a traitor to the Dominion. They will face the same fate as the humans." But even as he spoke, he knew it was too late. The humans had shown the galaxy something that the Dominion had worked for millennia to hide, that their power depended on consent. When member species stopped believing in Dominion invincibility, the entire system would collapse. And humanity had just spent 6 months systematically destroying that belief, one burned world at a time. Admiral Park Sung-Soo stood on the observation deck of his flagship, watching the evacuation ships leave New Sol Colony. Behind him, his staff worked quietly at their stations, coordinating the largest civilian evacuation in human history. In front of him, through the reinforced windows, he could see the lights of the cities below growing dimmer as millions of people abandoned their homes. New Sol had been humanity's pride, built on a world with perfect atmospheric conditions and rich natural resources. It had grown into a shining example of human civilization among the stars. Beautiful cities, advanced technology, art galleries and universities that had attracted visitors from across the galaxy. Now it was going to become something else entirely. "Sir," reported Captain Kim Mi-young, his operations officer, "the last civilian transport has cleared the atmosphere. All non-essential personnel have been evacuated." "And the volunteers?" Park asked quietly. 15,000 people chose to stay, sir. They understand the mission parameters." Park nodded. 15,000 volunteers who had chosen to remain behind to help sell the deception. They were soldiers, engineers, and demolition experts who had volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. Their job was to make New Sol look like a normal, populated colony when the Dominion fleet arrived. "Begin Phase 1, Park ordered. Across the planet's surface, teams of specialists began their work. They had been planning this operation for months, ever since intelligence reports confirmed that the Dominion was preparing a massive assault on New Sol. The colony was too important to humanity for the aliens to ignore, and too well defended for them to take easily. So humanity had decided to give it to them. The nuclear weapons were already in place, hidden in the foundations of every major city and industrial complex. Not the quick, clean fusion bombs that civilized species used for demolition. These were dirty weapons designed to spread radiation as widely as possible and render the entire planet uninhabitable for centuries. More importantly, they were connected to a dead man's switch. If the volunteers on the surface stopped sending regular status reports, or if they detected the approach of a Dominion fleet, the weapons would activate automatically. 3 days later, Fleet Admiral Kothmar arrived in the new Sol system with 400 ships. It was the largest single military force the Dominion had assembled in living memory. Enough firepower to reduce the planet to molten slag if necessary. "Admiral," reported his sensor officer, "we're detecting normal population signatures across the planet. Cities are operating at full capacity. They don't appear to be evacuating." Kothmar was puzzled. Intelligence reports suggested that humans had learned to evacuate their civilian populations before major battles. Why were they leaving New Sol undefended? "Sir," his communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet." "Put it through." The face that appeared on the screen was that of Governor Lee Jae-hyun, the civilian administrator of New Sol Colony. He looked calm and dignified, exactly what you would expect from a human leader facing impossible odds. "Admiral Kothmar," Governor Lee said politely, "I am authorized to negotiate the surrender of New Sol Colony. We have no military forces capable of resisting your fleet. We ask only that you treat our civilian population with the dignity required by galactic law." It was exactly what Kothmar had hoped to hear. A clean surrender, no messy battle, no human tricks or surprises. Just a simple occupation of a strategically important world. "Governor Lee," he replied, "I accept your surrender. Prepare for occupation. Forces to take control of your major cities. Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force." The occupation went smoothly. Dominion troops landed at spaceports and government buildings across New Sol, taking control of infrastructure and communication networks. The human population seemed resigned to their fate, offering no organized resistance. Governor Lee even hosted a formal ceremony in the capital city, officially transferring control of the colony to Dominion authorities. It was broadcast across the galaxy as an example of how civilized surrender should be conducted. The celebration lasted 3 days. Dominion officers toured the human cities, marveling at the advanced technology and beautiful architecture. Some even suggested that New Sol should be preserved as a model for how human colonies could be integrated into Dominion society. On the 4th day, at exactly noon local time, every nuclear weapon on the planet detonated simultaneously. The Theia explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. New Sol didn't just die, it became a miniature sun for 17 seconds, releasing enough energy to sterilize everything within the orbit of its 3rd moon. The Dominion fleet, celebrating their victory in close orbit, was instantly vaporized. 400 ships, 50,000 of the Dominion's best soldiers and officers, an entire planet with 15 million people. All gone in an instant of nuclear fire. But that wasn't the end of it. As the radiation cloud expanded through the system, it carried with it billions of microscopic transmitters. Each one broadcast the same message over and over again on every communication frequency used by the Dominion. "This is Admiral Park Sung-soo of the Human Defense Force. We told you that we don't stop until it's ash. New Sol is ash. Your fleet is ash. 15 million humans chose to die rather than live under alien rule. That should tell you something about our determination." The message continued for hours as the transmitters spread throughout the system. "You wanted New Sol. You have it. Enjoy the radiation. It will be glowing for the next 1,000 years." The news of New Sol's destruction reached Earth 18 hours later. President Kim Jin-ho was in his office when General Min-ho brought him the report. The president read it twice, then set it down carefully on his desk. 15 million people, he said quietly. Yes, sir. Every one of them a volunteer. Park Sung-soo's plan worked perfectly. The Dominion lost their entire Fourth Fleet and their most experienced field commanders. And we lost an entire world. A world we were going to lose anyway, sir. This way, we made sure they paid the maximum price for taking it. The president was quiet for a long moment. General, I want you to explain something to me. How do we win this war without becoming monsters? Minho considered the question carefully. With respect, sir, I don't think we can. The Dominion made this choice when they decided to exterminate humanity. We can become monsters and win, or we can remain civilized and lose. Those are our only options. And if we win, what kind of species will we be afterward? Alive, sir. Our children will be alive, and they can decide what kind of species they want to be. That same day, Dr. Lee Yuna presented her final report on Project Genesis to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. She was a theoretical physicist who had spent her entire career studying the most destructive forces in the universe. Now she was going to weaponize them. Gentlemen, she began, activating a holographic display that showed a detailed star chart. Project Genesis is ready for implementation. We have successfully developed the technology to artificially trigger stellar collapse in any star with the appropriate mass and composition. General Minho leaned forward. Explain that in simple terms, Doctor. We can make stars explode, sir. More specifically, we can turn them into black holes that move in whatever direction we choose. A single Genesis weapon can sterilize every planet in a target system and then continue on to the next system. The room fell silent. The implications were staggering. How many Genesis weapons do we have? Asked Admiral Kim Do-won. Currently, 12 operational units. Each one is capable of destroying approximately 50 star systems before its fuel is exhausted. We can build more, but the exotic matter required is extremely difficult to produce. And if we use them? Dr. Lee's expression was grim. If we deploy all 12 Genesis weapons against Dominion space, we can eliminate roughly 600 star systems. That represents about 70% of their total territory and 85% of their population. And what happens to those star systems afterward? They become uninhabitable for millions of years. The gravitational disruption from the artificial black holes would make it impossible for new life to develop. We would essentially be creating permanent dead zones in the galaxy. The silence stretched for long minutes. Finally, President Kim spoke. Dr. Lee, what would happen if the Dominion developed similar weapons? They couldn't, sir. This technology requires a complete understanding of quantum gravity manipulation, which is at least 500 years beyond their current capabilities. By the time they could develop Genesis weapons, humanity would either be extinct or have progressed to technologies that make these weapons obsolete. So this is our advantage, our one chance to end this war permanently. Yes, sir. But I must emphasize that using Genesis weapons would make us the most hated species in galactic history. We would be destroying entire civilizations, billions of innocent people who had nothing to do with their government's decisions. President Kim nodded slowly. Doctor, I want you to prepare for full deployment of Project Genesis, but don't activate the weapons yet. First, we're going to give the Dominion one final chance to surrender. Foreign Minister Na Seojun was the one chosen to deliver humanity's ultimatum. He was a career diplomat who had spent decades trying to find peaceful solutions to interstellar conflicts. Now he was going to threaten the destruction of galactic civilization. The broadcast went out simultaneously to every world in Dominion space. Na Seojun appeared on screens across thousands of planets, his expression calm and his voice steady. "People of the Galactic Dominion," he began, "I am Foreign Minister Na Seojun of the United Earth Government. I speak to you today as a representative of humanity, but more importantly, as someone who hopes to prevent the greatest catastrophe in galactic history." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Your leaders have chosen to wage a war of extermination against the human species. They have murdered millions of our people and declared their intention to remove us from the galaxy entirely. We have responded with equal force, showing you that humanity cannot be intimidated or destroyed easily." The broadcast continued for 20 minutes, with Na Seojun calmly explaining the current military situation and the casualties on both sides. "But now we have reached a crossroads. Humanity has developed weapons capable of destroying entire star systems. We can eliminate your civilization completely, reducing your worlds to ash and your people to memory. We have the power to commit genocide on a galactic scale." He leaned forward slightly. "We don't want to use these weapons. We would prefer to find a peaceful solution to this conflict. But we will not allow our species to be exterminated. If the Dominion continues this war, if you refuse to allow humanity to exist in peace, then we will use every weapon at our disposal to ensure our survival." The broadcast ended with a simple statement that chilled every listener. "You have 72 hours to announce your unconditional surrender. If you refuse, we will demonstrate that our threats are not empty boasts. Choose wisely. This is the last choice you will ever make." Overlord Kethmore stood in his command center on the fortress world of Vex Prime, watching the tactical displays with growing despair. 3 years had passed since the war began, and the Dominion was dying. Not quickly, like a warrior cut down, in battle, but slowly and painfully, like a victim of poison. The numbers were undeniable. 47 worlds had been completely sterilized by human weapons. 212 more were uninhabitable due to biological warfare. The Dominion military had lost 60% of its ships and 70% of its experienced commanders. Worse yet, 18 member species had declared neutrality and withdrawn from the war entirely. "Sir," reported Intelligence Officer Morketh, "we've received word from the Christine Collective. They're offering to surrender to the humans directly if we promise not to retaliate against their worlds." Kethamore's form rippled with rage. "Cowards! After 3,000 years of Dominion protection, they abandon us at the first sign of real resistance." But even as he spoke, he understood their decision. The humans had made it clear that they viewed the entire Dominion as a single entity. Species that remained loyal would share the same fate as the leadership. Species that surrendered early might be allowed to survive under human oversight. It was a brilliant strategy, designed to break apart the alliance that held the Dominion together. And it was working. Admiral Choi Yeonsu was demonstrating exactly how effective human psychological warfare had become. Her target was the Morthen Shipyard Complex at Kepler Station, the largest military construction facility in Dominion space. Taking it would cripple the aliens' ability to replace their losses. But Yeonsu didn't simply attack the station. Instead, she positioned her fleet just outside weapons range and began broadcasting to the defenders. "This is Admiral Choi Yeonsu of the Human Defense Force." Her message went out on all frequencies. "I am prepared to offer the garrison of Kepler Station a choice." The station's commander, Fleet Captain Veldorn, responded immediately. "Human Admiral, this is a military installation. We will fight to defend it." "I'm sure you will," Yeonsu replied calmly. "But first, let me explain your situation. My fleet consists of 47 ships armed with Genesis torpedoes. Each torpedo is capable of turning this entire star system into a black hole. I could destroy you all right now without risking a single human life." She paused, letting that sink in. "But I'm going to give you an opportunity to save your people. I will allow evacuation ships to remove all non-essential personnel from the station. Families, civilian workers, anyone who doesn't need to be here for military purposes. You have 6 hours to get them to safety." Captain Veldorn was confused. "Why would you allow us to evacuate? That reduces the psychological impact of destroying the station." "Because," Yansu said, and her voice carried a note of genuine sadness, "I have children of my own. I don't want to kill your children if I don't have to, but I will destroy this station. The only question is how many innocents die with it." The evacuation began immediately. Thousands of families boarded transport ships and fled the system, carrying with them stories of human mercy that spread throughout Dominion space. But the evacuation also served another purpose. It allowed the remaining defenders to hope that they might survive. For 3 days, Yansu waited. She allowed supply ships to approach the station. She permitted the defenders to reinforce their positions. She even allowed a relief fleet to arrive and take defensive positions around the facility. Then, when the defenders had convinced themselves that the humans were bluffing, she struck. But the attack didn't come from her fleet. Instead, it came from inside the station itself. Human infiltrators who had been hidden among the civilian population for months suddenly activated, sabotaging critical systems and opening airlocks to space. The relief fleet moved to assist the station, only to discover that the evacuation ships they had allowed to pass were actually human warships in disguise. Caught between the infiltrators inside the station and the disguise fleet outside, the Dominion forces were annihilated within hours. The message Yansu broadcast afterward was heard across the galaxy. "This is what happens when you give humans time to plan. We offered your people mercy and many accepted it. Those who chose to fight died. Choose more wisely next time." Dr. Moon Jae-min was putting the finishing touches on humanity's most insidious weapon yet. It wasn't designed to kill quickly or cause maximum destruction. Instead, it was designed to remove the enemy's ability to fight back permanently. "The beauty of the isolation virus," he explained to his research team, "is that it doesn't damage the body. It only affects the mind, specifically the parts of the brain that allow for interstellar travel. The virus was a masterpiece of biological engineering. When it infected a member of a spacefaring species, it created a crippling phobia of open space. Victims became unable to tolerate the psychological stress of traveling between stars. They could function normally on planetary surfaces, but put them in a spaceship and they would suffer complete mental breakdown. Once a species is infected," Dr. Moon continued, "they become permanently stranded on whatever worlds they currently occupy. They can maintain orbital facilities and short-range transportation, but interstellar civilization becomes impossible. The first test came when human ships released the virus into the atmosphere of 3 Vextar worlds. Within months, the entire population was affected. Vextar commanders who had spent centuries traveling between stars suddenly found themselves unable to leave their home systems. But the virus didn't stop there. It was designed to spread through communication networks, carried in the quantum entanglement fields that allowed faster-than-light communication. Every time an infected individual used interstellar communication, they spread the virus to whoever they contacted. Within a year, the isolation virus had spread to over 100 Dominion worlds. Entire species found themselves cut off from the rest of the galaxy, watching helplessly as their interstellar civilization crumbled around them. The psychological impact was devastating. Species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia suddenly couldn't travel beyond their own star systems. Trade networks collapsed. Military coordination became impossible. The very foundation of Dominion power was destroyed by a weapon that didn't kill a single person. Captain Shin Yunji received the most important mission in human military history. Her target was Dominion Prime, the capital world of the alien empire, and home to over 50 billion people. It was the most heavily defended system in the galaxy, surrounded by automated defense platforms and protected by the largest fleet the Dominion could assemble. But Yunji wasn't planning to attack immediately. Instead, she positioned her small fleet at the edge of the system and began broadcasting a message that every person in the galaxy could hear. "Citizens of Dominion Prime," she said, her voice calm and clear. "I am Captain Shin Yunji of the Human Defense Force. I am here to deliver a message from humanity to your leadership." The broadcast was picked up by every communication network in Dominion space. Billions of people across thousands of worlds stopped what they were doing to listen. 3 years ago, your leaders gave humanity an ultimatum. Leave our colonies or be destroyed. We refused, and you began a war of extermination against our species. You murdered 12 million civilians on New Busan. You targeted our children, our families, our homes. Yunji paused, and when she continued, her voice carried the weight of 3 years of terrible warfare. Now I'm going to tell you what that war has cost. The human colony of New Sol, population 15 million, all dead. The Vexstar religious homeworld, population 2 billion, all dead. The Morthan nursery complexes, 800,000 developing consciousnesses, all dead. The list continued for 20 minutes. World after world, species after species, victim after victim. The galaxy listened in horrified silence as Yunji recited the casualties of humanity's war of survival. "But those are just numbers," she said finally. "Let me tell you about the people. Lee Min-seo, age 7, lived on New Busan with her parents and 3 brothers. She wanted to be a xenobiologist when she grew up. She died when your orbital bombardment turned her school into radioactive glass. More names followed, hundreds of them. Children and parents, teachers and artists, ordinary people living ordinary lives until the war came for them. I could continue this list for days," Yunji said. "Every human who died in this war had a name, a family, dreams for the future. Your leaders took all of that away when they decided that humanity didn't deserve to exist." The transmission continued with detailed accounts of human casualties, each story more heartbreaking than the last. But the purpose wasn't just to share grief, it was to establish the moral justification for what came next. "In exactly 72 hours," Yunji announced, "this star system will cease to exist. Dominion Prime, its moons, its orbital installations, and everything within 3 billion kilometers will be consumed by an artificially created black hole." The galaxy held its breath. 50 billion people live in this system. Most of them have never harmed a human being. Most of them probably opposed this war. But their government chose to make this a war of extermination, and we have learned that the only way to win such a war is to be better at extermination than your enemies. Emperor Thexquil himself responded to the broadcast, his image appearing on screens across the galaxy. He was an ancient being, older than most civilizations, and his voice carried the authority of 3 millennia of rule. "Human captain," he said, "surely you cannot be serious. You speak of destroying an entire system, killing 50 billion innocent people. No civilized species would commit such an atrocity. Yunji's response was immediate and chilling. Your Majesty, we stopped being civilized the day you murdered our children on New Busan. We told you from the beginning that we don't stop until it's ash. You chose not to believe us. General Bae Young-ho was monitoring the situation from his command post on Earth. For 3 years, he had been implementing the most comprehensive intelligence operation in human history. Now it was time to reveal just how thoroughly humanity had infiltrated Dominion society. Activate all sleeper assets, he ordered. Full implementation of Operation Final Dawn. Across Dominion space, humans who had lived and worked among the aliens for decades suddenly revealed their true purpose. They had been teachers, merchants, technicians, and servants. Some had even married into alien families and raised hybrid children. All of them had been waiting for this moment. The assassinations began simultaneously across 1,000 worlds. Dominion military commanders died in their homes, killed by human servants who had waited patiently for years. Government officials were poisoned by their human advisors. Even some members of the Council of Hierarchs found themselves facing human agents they had trusted completely. But the killings weren't random. Each target had been carefully selected for maximum psychological impact. The humans didn't just kill the leaders, they killed their families too, making it clear that no one in the Dominion hierarchy was safe. Within hours, the Dominion's command structure was in chaos. Military units couldn't contact their superiors. Government agencies couldn't coordinate responses. The entire apparatus of imperial control was paralyzed by the systematic elimination of its leadership. As reports flooded in from across Dominion space, Emperor Thexquill realized that the humans had been planning this moment for decades. Every diplomatic contact, every trade agreement, every cultural exchange had been part of a vast intelligence operation designed to position human agents throughout Dominion society. The 72-hour countdown continued to tick away, and with each passing hour, it became clearer that humanity had the capability to carry out their threat. The Genesis weapons were real. The human fleet was in position. And most terrifyingly of all, they had already proven that they would sacrifice anything to ensure their species' survival. With 12 hours remaining, Emperor Thexquill made the hardest decision of his 3,000-year reign. He activated the emergency broadcast system and sent a message to every world in the galaxy. This is Emperor Thexquill of the Galactic Dominion. I am prepared to discuss terms for ending this. Va. Captain Shin Yunji's response was broadcast just as widely. Your Majesty, the time for discussion has passed. You have 12 hours to announce your unconditional surrender. If you do not, this system dies, and we move on to the next one. We told you from the beginning, we don't stop until it's ash. Emperor Thexquill stood in the center of his throne room, surrounded by the few advisors who had survived the human assassinations. Outside the palace windows, he could see the lights of Dominion Prime stretching to the horizon. 50 billion. People going about their daily lives, unaware that they had less than 12 hours to live. The countdown display floating above his throne showed 11 hours, 47 minutes, and 32 seconds remaining. Each second that passed brought his civilization closer to annihilation. Your Majesty, urged Chancellor Velmon, one of the few government officials still alive, you must make the announcement. The humans have proven they will carry out their threats. Thexquill was 3,000 years old. He had ruled the galaxy longer than most species had possessed written language. He had seen civilizations rise and fall, watched countless wars end in negotiated settlements where both sides claimed victory. But this was different. These humans didn't want territory or resources or political concessions. They wanted complete and total surrender, followed by the systematic dismantlement of everything the Dominion had built. "If I surrender," he said, quietly, "what happens to our people?" "They live, Your Majesty. That's more than they'll have if we refuse." The Emperor activated his personal communicator and sent a message to Captain Shin Yunji's ship. Within minutes, her image appeared on the main screen. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice completely calm, "you have 11 hours and 34 minutes remaining. Captain Yunji, I am prepared to discuss terms for ending this war." "There are no terms to discuss, Your Majesty. You surrender unconditionally, or this system dies. Those are your only options." "And if we surrender, what happens to the Dominion?" Yunji's expression didn't change. "The Dominion ceases to exist. Every military installation will be destroyed. Every warship will be scrapped. Every weapon capable of threatening human worlds will be eliminated. Your member species will be confined to their home systems under human oversight. And the leadership? What happens to those who made the decisions?" "That depends on President Kim Jin-ho's judgment. But I would suggest that anyone responsible for ordering attacks on human civilians should not expect mercy." Emperor Thexaquil closed his eyes. In his long life, he had made many difficult decisions, but none as hard as this one. He was about to surrender the greatest empire in galactic history to a species that had been in space for less than 50 years. "Captain Yunji," he said finally, "I will broadcast my surrender in 1 hour, but I ask for one thing in return. You're not in a position to ask for anything, Your Majesty. Please." The word came from deep within the Emperor's soul, carrying all the weight of his 3 millennia of rule. "Allow my people to remember that we were more than just your enemies. We built beautiful things. We created art and literature and science. We weren't always at war." For the first time in the conversation, Yunji's expression softened slightly. "Your Majesty, humanity has no interest in destroying your culture or your achievements. We just want to make sure you never again have the power to threaten our children." 57 minutes later, Emperor Thexaquil appeared on every screen in the galaxy. His image was broadcast to human ships and Dominion worlds alike, carrying the words that would end the greatest war in galactic history. "Citizens of the Galactic Dominion," he began, his ancient voice heavy with defeat. "I speak to you today not as your emperor, but as someone who loves our civilization and wants it to survive." He paused, gathering strength for what came next. 3 years ago, the Council of Hierarchs made a decision that I now realize was the greatest mistake in our history. We demanded that humanity abandon their colonies and return to their home system. When they refused, we chose war. The Emperor's image filled screens across thousands of worlds as billions of people listened to words they had never expected to hear. We underestimated them. We thought they were a primitive species that could be easily controlled. We were wrong. Humanity has proven that they are the most dangerous force this galaxy has ever known, not because of their technology, but because of their absolute commitment to survival. Thexaquil looked directly into the camera. "They have given us a choice. Surrender completely, or watch our worlds burn one by one until nothing remains. I have seen what they are capable of. I have watched them sacrifice their own people, rather, than submit to our authority. I have no doubt that they will carry out their threats. The announcement that followed was heard in stunned silence across Dominion space. Therefore, as Emperor of the Galactic Dominion, I hereby announce our unconditional surrender to the forces of humanity. All Dominion military units are ordered to stand down immediately. All member species are instructed to cooperate fully with human occupation forces. President Kim Jin-ho was in his office on Earth when the surrender came through. He had been awake for 36 hours straight, coordinating the final phases of humanity's war plan. Now, suddenly, it was over. "Sir," General Minho reported, "we're receiving confirmation from across Dominion space. Military units are laying down their weapons. Planetary governors are requesting instructions for peaceful transition." The President nodded slowly. "And our Genesis weapons?" Captain Shin Yunji reports that her countdown has been canceled. Dominion Prime is safe. Kim Jin-ho felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years. Relief. "General, implement Phase 7 of Protocol Wildfire. Begin the occupation." Admiral Park Hyun-woo, who had started this war by receiving the Dominion's ultimatum, was chosen to oversee their surrender. His flagship, the Taegeuk's Fury, entered the Dominion Prime system flanked by a fleet of human warships. But these weren't the same ships that had fled from Dominion forces 3 years ago. These were vessels forged in the crucible of total war, armed with weapons that could sterilize planets and crewed by people who had learned to fight without mercy. The formal surrender ceremony took place in the same chamber where Dr. Park Nari had tried to negotiate peace 3 years earlier. This time, the positions were reversed. The Council of Hierarchs, what remained of them, stood in positions of submission while human officers occupied the seats of power. "Emperor Thexquil," Admiral Park said formally, "by the authority of the United Earth Government, I accept your surrender. The Galactic Dominion is hereby dissolved. All member species are now under human administration." The Emperor bowed his head. "Admiral Park, I place my people under your protection. I ask only that you remember they are more than just your defeated enemies. They will be treated according to their behavior during the transition," Park replied. "Those who cooperate will be allowed to rebuild their lives under human oversight. Those who resist will be dealt with accordingly." The dismantlement of the Dominion began immediately. Human engineering teams swarmed over alien shipyards, destroying the infrastructure needed to build military vessels. Weapon stockpiles were either destroyed or confiscated. Advanced technology that could threaten human worlds was systematically eliminated. But the humans were thorough in ways that surprised many observers. They didn't just destroy military capabilities. They made sure those capabilities could never be rebuilt. Specialized knowledge was removed from computer systems. Scientists who understood weapons technology were relocated to human-controlled worlds. Even theoretical research that might lead to dangerous applications was shut down. Dr. Kang Mik-young was appointed as Earth's first colonial administrator, responsible for governing the former Dominion territories. She was a career civil servant who had spent decades studying alien cultures, and she understood the enormous challenge ahead. "The easy part is over," she told her staff during their first planning meeting. "We won the war. Now we have to win the peace." The numbers were staggering. 12,000 inhabited worlds, hundreds of different species, trillions of people who had to learn to live under human rule. Some would cooperate, others would resist. All of them would have to be managed. "Our goal," Dr. Kang continued, "is not to oppress these people. but to make sure they never again pose a threat to humanity. We want them to prosper and build good lives for their families. We just want to make sure those lives don't include the ability to build weapons that can destroy human worlds. The new order took shape slowly. Former Dominion species were allowed to maintain their own governments, but under human oversight. They could trade with each other and develop their technology, but certain areas of research were forbidden. Military forces were strictly limited to what was needed for local police work. Most importantly, interstellar travel was controlled entirely by humanity. No alien ship could travel between star systems without human permission and escort. This single restriction ensured that no alien species could build the kind of widespread alliance that had threatened Earth. Colonel Song Jinwoo was chosen to deliver humanity's final message to the galaxy. He was a military historian who had studied every major conflict in galactic history, and he understood the importance of making the lessons of this war clear to future generations. His broadcast went out to every world in human space, carrying the official conclusion of the Human Dominion War. "People of the galaxy," he began, "3 years ago, the Galactic Dominion made a choice that changed the course of galactic history forever. They looked at humanity and decided we were a threat that needed to be eliminated. They gave us an ultimatum: abandon our homes or be destroyed." Colonel Song paused, letting his words carry across the light years to every inhabited world. "We chose a third option. We chose to fight. Not for conquest or glory, but for the simple right to exist. We fought with everything we had, sacrificed everything we valued, and did things that we hope never to do again." The broadcast continued for an hour, explaining humanity's perspective on the war and their hopes for the future. "Some of you will say that we were too harsh, that we could have found a peaceful solution. Perhaps you're right. But when someone threatens to kill your children, you don't take chances. You do whatever is necessary to protect them, regardless of the cost to yourself or your enemies." Song's expression was grim but determined. "We hope this war taught the galaxy an important lesson. Humanity asks very little from our neighbors. We want to trade freely, explore peacefully, and raise our families without fear. We're willing to share our knowledge, our friendship, and our resources with anyone who approaches us honestly." He leaned forward slightly. "But we will never again allow another species to threaten our existence. We have proven that we are willing to become monsters to ensure our survival. We have shown that we will sacrifice our own worlds rather than submit to extinction. We have demonstrated that when we say we don't stop until it's ash, we mean exactly that." The broadcast ended with words that would be remembered for generations. The galaxy is at peace now. It will remain at peace as long as everyone remembers what happens to those who mistake human patience for weakness. 50 years later, President Lee Soo-young stood before the Memorial of Sacrifice on New Earth, humanity's new capital world. The memorial contained the names of every human who had died in the Dominion War, carved into black stone that stretched for kilometers in every direction. The galaxy had changed dramatically in the decades since the war ended. Former Dominion species had built new civilizations under human guidance, many of them more prosperous than they had ever been under alien rule. Trade flourished between the stars, art and science advanced rapidly, and most species seemed content with the new order. But the memorial served as a reminder of the price that had been paid for that peace. 50 billion humans had died in 3 years of total war. Entire worlds had been sacrificed. A generation had grown up knowing nothing but conflict and loss. "They died so that we could live," President Lee said during the memorial ceremony. "They chose destruction over submission, death over slavery. Because of their sacrifice, human children can grow up free among the stars. She looked out at the crowd of humans and aliens who had come to pay their respects. The war is over. The Dominion is gone. Humanity rules the galaxy not because we sought power, but because we refused to die. We hope never to fight such a war again. But if we must, if anyone again threatens the children of Earth, we will remember the lesson this memorial teaches. The President's final words echoed across the galaxy, carried by news networks to every inhabited world. We are not cruel by nature. We are not monsters by choice, but we are human, and we protect what is ours. Remember that, and the galaxy will know peace, forget it, and learn what our enemies learned. We don't stop until it's ash. The memorial ceremony ended in silence, 50 billion names standing as testament to humanity's greatest triumph and greatest tragedy. In the end, they had kept their promise. The Dominion was ash, scattered on the stellar winds, and humanity's children were free to inherit the galaxy their parents had died to win.